CBRE's Change Management webinar. We're very fortunate to be collaborating with CBRE Vietnam, Singapore, and also with KPMG Vietnam, BritCham Vietnam, and also the British University of Vietnam. My name is Jonathan. I'm the head of tenant representation team, workplace and change lead here in Hanoi in Vietnam. Before we get going, just some housekeeping. So during the presentation, there will be a QR code flashing up, which will be to create a feedback, fill out a feedback survey form. That will also allow you to receive the presentation that we'll send out later on after the event, and a Q&A box. So at the bottom, should you have questions throughout the presentation, we will do our best to get to them in the panel discussion. So click on the Q&A box, type your question in, click send. I know that one of our presenters will be asking for some interaction. So you'll see also there's a raise hand icon on the bottom. Please do click that when asked to do so for your participation. This morning we're splitting into two sections. The first section will be a change management presentation, followed by a panel discussion and Q&A, where we'll really try to deep dive and get into some of the more interesting sections of this very, very fascinating topic and quite a relevant topic during this current pandemic, and also get to hear some real life examples of two very strong and large organizations within Vietnam and what they've gone through pre-pandemic and during the pandemic up to now. So I'd like to introduce our first speakers for the presentation. So first is Fiona Alexander. So Fiona is Senior Director and the Head of Workplace Southeast Asia for CBRE. Fiona is based in Singapore. And then Tamara Darwin, who's a Director in Workplace Strategy Southeast Asia and also based in Singapore. Ladies, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Good morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen. Just checking that you guys can see my screen at the moment. All good? Jonathan, can you see my screen that I'm sharing?
Yep, all good, Tamara.
Great stuff. Hi, good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today and share a topic close to my heart, change management, which is what I have been focusing on for the past 10 years of my career, the people side of real estate, as I call it. Change management really refers to the approaches to prepare and support individuals, teams and organizations in making organizational changes, be that locational, functional, or transformational change. This is one of my favorite quotes from a Greek philosopher who lived some 2,500 years ago. There is nothing permanent except change, and who was apparently unfamiliar with death and taxes at the time. We all have pretty much experienced major changes in our lives, changes growing up, through the educational process, changes in our careers and life experiences. It is really the only constants in our lives, really. And just on that note, can I have a quick show of hand of those of us in the room this morning? And please use the raise button just to see who is currently working in a different city or different countries to their place of birth, if we can have a quick show of hand. Excellent, great stuff. Okay, so that's good. I think that it's fair to say that there's quite a number of us who are experience a fair bit of changes in their life. And these days, it's not uncommon to be born in one place, raised in another, and work somewhere else entirely different. We constantly deal with changes, learn to adapt to them in order to thrive in our new environment. And organizations are no different. They change, they grow with time, and they are shaped by people. And now let's address the elephant in the room, the COVID-19 pandemic. Change happens around us every day, and without a doubt, COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed our social and business world in the past year and a half. Very much in the way that we work, where we work, our daily habits, certainly traveling. Gosh, I don't even remember what it's like to board the plane anymore. And as you are, very well experienced, new hobbies were discovered. Certainly in Singapore, we see a rise in the bicycle sales. New skills are learned, such as gardening, knitting, beer brewing, and at least in my case, baking. Right, that's what I've been taking up in the past years. So personal life aside, its most obvious impact on the business world is that rapid and mass move to work from home, except of course for essential services during lockdown periods. Some organizations with embedded flexibilities in their processes and their ways of working, and with the right supported technology, manage this shift with relative ease compared to others who perhaps have yet to build in that infrastructure and the resilience mindset in their people. An important aspect of how well organizations function through the pandemic in the last year and a half pretty much lied in their people engagement initiatives. It's all about how well they're communicating about guidelines and safety, any new work protocols and norms from remote working. And really it's about that engagement in bringing people together virtually as much as possible, both for work and social connections. So through this engagement, organizations who have done it very well managed to keep a very close pulse on what works well and not so well with remote working for their staff and organizations, and use these insights as basis to further explore the future workplace direction in order to build resilience into their organizations to deal with further changes and disruption in the future. So with that note aside, I will pass on to Fiona to take you through what this means in the workplace evolution. Fiona, over to you.
Thanks, Tamara, and thanks so much for the opportunity to join this panel today. So just want to talk a little bit about what this means for the workplace evolution. Obviously, we've gone through a number of changes and trends in the industry for over the last many years. So 1970, you look back in the cube farm there, a terrible era for us all, isolating, really awful experience of not having collaboration or connection with anybody, and just really task-based. So we then went to an open workplace, thankfully, and started to be able to connect with one another and be more creative, really show innovation within the collaboration of the organization. Then we started the whole phase of distributed work. And then we quickly moved on to activity-based settings, where we started to realize that we needed specific places for doing all these new types of tasks. So we had multiple different types. So I know most people know it as ABW. And then we actually started looking at co-working incubator space. That was back in 2016. And now here we are today with remote and hybrid working. It's not a new thing. Hybrid working has been happening for a very long time, but it's really new to a lot of people now, where it's actually being implemented in effect right across the whole portfolio of employees. People that were even told that they couldn't work from home suddenly had to work from home due to COVID. So it really did change the whole philosophy and thinking of organizations as to what did that actually mean, and how could people be engaged and still work for a company without actually having any issues with technology or feeling separated from the organization. So a lot of the findings that we've done, everybody's asking us, at the moment for our understanding of what the market kind of viewpoint is. And we've definitely, kind of gleaned now that the employees prefer some degree of flexibility. I think, in the initial stages, people started, getting really worried about working from home and not feeling that connection. And it just went on for so long. And I think most countries have been, locked down and opened up again and locked down again. And it's been, an experience for employees to go through now. And they've actually really grown to like the flexibility that they have, whether it be for their family situation or whether it just be feeling that they can actually get more engaged when they're actually working on the screen. Most people are keen to actually work from home an average of 2 to 3 days per week, which is actually obviously a good section of the time that you actually spend working for your employer. But face-to-face interactions remain important. Obviously, we still are very great. Human behaviour, really drives us together and wants us to have that whole face-to-face connection. It's what we're really missing, I think, with the whole lockdown and disconnect of people. So that does really remain important. And then a huge emphasis now on health and wellness. I think now that's been the one thing that I would say if we could call a silver lining from what we've all been through with the pandemic, it's been the fact that people are now really grateful of everything about their wellness and really thinking about how they can take that to the next level. So what's the new ecosystem of work? So it's not really new, as I say, with hybrid working, it's always been a case. So we can work from airports, we could work from a coffee shop, we could work from a satellite office, but now we've actually started to harness this into an actual ecosystem. So it's not just, we happen to be at the airport, so we happen to work, we happen to go to the coffee shop. We now actually really understand that we can work anywhere. And work happens wherever we actually are. So whether that be in our home, whether we just step aside from our bed and sit on a chair, or whether we actually have a full office, or whether we go to our head office and all connect with other people, whether we work in a satellite office. There's a lot of organisations have decided now to look at near home facilities rather than actually people commuting to the office if it's a longer way. Coffee shops are obviously a really key place for people to connect, to meet up face to face without actually having to go to the office as well, and actually, still be able to work and do everything you need to do. Airports, still the jury's out as to when we'll all be using those again, but obviously we hope at some point, airports, train stations, bus stations, anywhere that we actually travel as well, that is obviously giving us the capability to work anywhere. So the big question I think that people are asking now, so what is the office actually for? If we're all working from home, why do we need the office? And I think that's a really key aspect now for people to think differently about the way that they work in the office when they actually come. So we talked about earlier about people still needing that face-to-face interaction. It still is a great place for people to be able to do that if it's built for the environment for people being able to do that. So it shouldn't be a place there that you just go in and sit at a desk and do your work. You can do that anywhere. It's a place there where people can connect with one another, they can get that creativity and innovation. And it's about redesigning the spaces to understand exactly what technology people need when they come to the office, whether they're going to be using Zoom or Blue Jeans or whatever kind of facilitating that they're needing there for people to connect again on conference calls, making sure the technology really supports, and obviously the services being there as well. So whether it needs to be like a coffee area just to give it a more relaxed vibe, and a space there where people can do private calls, just all the spaces that we need to think about. Again, thinking about ABW spaces, but thinking about them more really functional for the 2 or 3 days or 2 days that you come into the office. So they should be really purposeful. And then it's really about, you know, all our clients obviously are looking at just the employee experience, you know. So what does that feel like when I come to the office? Do I go in and there's nobody around and I just feel disconnected to the organization, or do I actually plan and connect with the team members that I want to connect with on that particular day that I go to the office to make it an actual experience? So it's two ways. So it's about creating the environment, but also creating the employee experience and helping people with technology that helps them connect together. So I'm going to hand back over to Tamara now.
Thanks a lot, Fiona. So you've heard from Fiona in terms of the changes that has been taking place, particularly its impact on the way that we are thinking about offices in the future. So really, another question is that in this increasingly complex and mobile world, what really will pull us together? You know, what really unifies us as an organization in order to face any challenges ahead and thrive? Right. And for us, really, it's about our shared beliefs and values commonly known as culture. And why is this important? Culture really reflects the reality of us, of people working together every day. Having the right culture can help teams to overcome barriers of ambiguity and together and build that resilience. And the most important thing is that culture needs to be established and well communicated in order to shape perceptions, behaviors, and drive the changes that is needed for the organizations to thrive in any challenges that may come ahead. So as part of this presentations, I did a bit of a research into the Vietnamese working culture, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, these are some of the generalizations and stereotypes, but they very much indicate the behaviors that are fostered in most companies in Vietnam today. Right? So what I understand is, you know, and I've also had experience in delivering change programs in both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City in the past few years. And what we observe is that workplaces in Vietnam, and to be honest, in Asia as a whole, are very hierarchical. It's based on age and positions, and everybody tends to have a distinctive place and roles to play within their business. Right? And companies function in a very much a hierarchical manner. And decisions are made at the top. And the decision makers are often the most, the oldest one in the organization, but this is changing. And what we're also seeing is that personal relationship plays a very large role in Vietnamese business culture. Usually business contacts in Vietnam are referrals, and a recommendation from existing business associates is often common. Today, maybe less so because of the fierce competitions and the rise in the internet where people can establish direct connection, but that tends to, the personal relationship regardless plays a very large role. And this one I've personally experienced myself is that trust is built socially outside the office. As a change manager delivering project back in Vietnam a few years ago, very much in terms of having that side conversation is always important as having, you know, the formal communication that is done via either town halls or the official newsletter circulating to everybody in the office. Trust is very much built when you're having that coffee together, having breakfast together, just to really get to know each other before any other topics is really discussed. Right. And from speaking to many colleagues, clients in Vietnam, we understand that home is not always a conducive place to work because of certain family circumstances. Often in Vietnam, there are multi-generations living in the same household, so it can be disruptive when people are trying to work or indeed learn from home. And because of this, you know, this all comes together just to really demonstrate that if there's any changes that is taking place in Vietnam, I'm told that it's going to take time, a lot of time. and patience. And I think we're going to hear a lot more from our panel discussion later in terms of how some of our organizations has overcome in terms of tweaking our working culture in order to cope with the disruption that is brought forth by the pandemic. With that said, again, this is one of another favorite quote of mine is to change before you have to. Right, and this is from the ex-chairman of GE. He is regarded as one of the greatest leader of his era, and I think this is really relevant in the sense that, you know, what we are here today is just to have that discussion in terms of what can we do today to think ahead, so that, you know, to prepare ourselves for upcoming changes instead of reacting to it when it comes. Okay. And with this note, Fiona, do you want to jump back in just to share a little bit in terms of how we typically approach change?
Yeah, thanks so much, Tamara. Yeah, so this is a real pet topic for us. It's actually really interesting the amount of people that talk about change management and actually send out emails or bulletins, you know, and we never actually class that as change management. We class that as delivery of the, you know, the objective in effect. And one of the things that we're really cognizant of is talking to people when they're ready to listen. So what does that mean? You know, if I talk to you about I'm going to do a big move, or I'm going to do a big change in your life, when I do that, initially it's such a bombshell to most people that it's just, you know, you can't compute it. You know, you've got a million questions in your head. You want to really think about what that change actually means to you. So when we say about talking about when people are ready to listen, it's about helping people through that change and not just telling them what it is, but actually listening to what the challenges are, listening to what questions are, really helping people actually through that whole engagement and understanding what that means to them in the end. And inspire and support people rather than manage it, you know. So change management is slightly misleading, you know, where we're not actually just managing it, we're actually listening and engaging. We want to really understand what those challenges are and help people through that whole experience as well. And then every real estate and design step is also a change, you know. So when you're going through and you're talking about what the new space is going to look like or what that change is going to impact, we need to think about that's another step, it's another thing that we've actually done, that we've added, you know. So we've got to keep thinking about how much change that we bring around. And as humans, you know, we're naturally just inquisitive, but actually a little bit worried about what that change is going to do to impact ourselves as well. So it's all about being really cognizant of what those big changes are. And the real objectives are obviously to help people perform better. And when we actually really engage with people to help them understand that we are trying to help them perform better, it starts to resonate and build, you know, the journey towards that objective. And then working differently. So not actually doing what you did before, but thinking differently, working differently. So again, you know, it's one of the things that you need to think about as to how are you going to actually approach that? You know, what's your mindset change going to be to get to that point? And then obviously if there's any changes, you know, with location, you know, it's what's the food going to be like when I'm there? You know, how am I going to travel there? You know, if I'm going to park my car or park my bike, you know, and then what does the move actually entail? If those aspects on the move, on the change of location aren't addressed, these are again key things that don't help people perform better or work differently. So a change philosophy and process, you know, people are obviously at the core of change thinking. It's not about changing the space, it's not about changing the type of work, it's about helping people think differently and transform their behaviour to meet the common objective, you know. So everything that we do is about planning, understanding and engaging. So we need a change in strategy plan right at the beginning. What things are we hearing? What things are we needing to address? You know, and what is the plan all the way through? People like to understand that there's a plan there to feel comfort that somebody is actually in control and helping them through this process. And then the change execution is obviously critical, that we obviously do that whole engagement as well. And then when we actually do the change, some people don't actually take on board the full extent of change until they go live. So they actually move into the new space on that day, or they go through the change that they're actually having on that day. And then they come back and they start to reflect on what they had heard before, but they need a lot of support on that day. So we talk about day one support. It's about day one, day two, day three, helping people just start to rationalize that in their head as to the change that's being impacted. And then it's always really important that we do a post-occupancy review. What's gone well, what could be improved, things that need to be tweaked to make that whole experience really engaging and supporting for the change for people. So how do we manage with disruption? You know, obviously we've gone through a huge change as a team as to how we engage as well, because I think, you know, if you just send out emails, it wouldn't have changed anything, but our team are very, very much hands-on. We're all about engaging with people day to day to understand what the challenges are, sitting with face-to-face interviews. A lot of what we did was face-to-face, so we've had to go through a lot of change ourselves and really start to understand what's the change in the workplace, you know, especially for each employer, very, very different aspects of change. And then how people are going to start working remotely. So not only now any real estate people having just looking after a portfolio of just offices, they're actually now looking after people's homes in effect as well. So their portfolio has doubled, trebled, you know, and to the point there where obviously all employees working from home. That whole engagement there is really, really key, that people have got a safe working environment at home and a healthy one as well. We have started to really leverage tools, like we've got a tool called Matterport, which actually allows us remote visiting of offices anywhere around the world, which is a great real estate tool for somebody sitting in a country in lockdown that can't actually obviously get on a plane and go and be there physically. So now you can actually go in and visit through Matterport and do a site tour. So those kind of tools that we have are more and more important than they ever were. You know, it was always something there that was nice to have. Now it's something there that's a critical way of connecting with the other parts of the world. And really started using things like Mural. It's a free tool that everybody can use online, and it's great really for collaboration and connectivity, for people to really harness ideas, be able to use it very interactively, jot down ideas, and then to be able to take a view as to how they all move forward on that basis of the ideas that they've collected. So these are just some of the tools that we've actually used as a team, going through our own change, and understanding obviously how we can really leverage the fact that we're still working from home in a lot of ways as well. So we've conducted a lot of research and benchmark analysis with our clients across different industries to really help us understand how do we get engaged better, how do we really help that employee experience and that heightened awareness of well-being, and address those factors as well. So that's really the absolute keys to managing obviously with all this disruption. And then we've got built obviously our tools to deliver virtually. We're using Slido, Miro, Mentimeter. We obviously use Teams. We use Mural, as I just touched upon earlier. So we're all about looking at some of those really great tools that have even actually been introduced during the pandemic, and understanding how we can actually engage and really feel again that people actually feel part of something, and not just delivered a message as to tell them what the change is going to look like. So we're always about ensuring participation and engagement. You know, I think that's really, really critical. One of the things on group size, I think that's really important as well, is about really understanding how we're engaging with people as to when you do the engagement of a group size, it's really important as to how people feel they can actually communicate. So if the group size is more than 5, people do feel a little bit more resistant to sharing, especially people that aren't really forthcoming in doing that. So it's about keeping the group size really small, really dynamic, so that people can throw ideas around and be really creative. Whereas if you're doing a sharing session like a town hall, it's obviously great then to have the full organisation actually present, and that really helps leverage the messaging going through, and people can actually share really openly with one another post the meeting rather than during the meeting. So we're really careful to make sure that we address that group size as well. And I'll just pass over to Tamara now to talk a bit more about behind the scenes.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Just one of the fun depiction of how workplace transformation take place. So I think often when people are looking at workplace transformation, the most visible parts are the new great offices, perhaps flexible working practices as a result of that, and what we're trying to achieve are happy, productive employees, and very much that resilience in organization in order to adapt and thrive in any new challenges. But what really goes on behind the scene, as you can see underneath the icebergs, are these lots of consideration which shapes around leaderships, because that steer is really important, particularly what we talked about earlier in hierarchical organizations in particular. And it's all about working with various teams to ensure that that purpose, that workplace is well thought of, people are well engaged, and the processes are supporting the people and the workplace in the first place. And of course, when we are dealing with people, there is a range of emotions, and I think Warwick and Chris can attest to some of this a little bit later when introducing change through the organizations, but there's a lot of emotion that needs to be managed behind the scenes as we are working through the workplace transformations. So as Fiona has mentioned, really, this is not about managing the change, but providing support and talk to about what matters to people. So often we don't really talk about space, but more talking about how to support people work better, to become better leaders, better team players in the future, and then tie it back to the place, the processes, and how these will enable them to reach their goals and ambitions. All right, and just lastly to leave you with, often when people ask me what I do as a change manager, so I think this will give a good idea in terms of what my friends thinks I do. It's all fun and parties, meeting lots of people. My mum tends to think it's all very glamorous and glitzy. I don't think she really gets what I'm doing either. And I think for society, change management in particularly in Vietnam, is quite a new concept still. So it's a bit of a mystery when you are being introduced in an organization as a change manager. Often it's met with a bit of, what do these guys do? And for us, we're always constantly on the go, meeting clients, being within the client office. So my team often just see me as a blur around the office as I whiz back and forth, engaging, talking to different people. What I think I do is changing the world with one workplace at a time, hence that superhero cape that you can see there. But I think the reality is all about multitasking, right? So being a change manager meaning that sometimes you act as a call center for people to ask about all sorts of questions. You're the researcher, because in order to really talk about changes that has to be backed up with data and facts, best practices in the industry. Being a therapist, somebody's agony aunt, I think that happens quite often because of the emotional aspects. And you name it, event organizer, MC, and even to a certain extent, the encyclopedia. I've had people coming up and ask me, like, where can they buy sand? Because they want to build a sand pit for their kid. And I was like, okay, I managed to find the answers eventually. But so just to conclude our presentations, I just want to leave you guys with one of my favorite quote from Winston Churchill. That is, to improve is to change, and to be perfect is to change often. And you know what? Practice makes perfect. And remember, change happens every day, so you're not alone on your change journeys. And if ever in doubt, hire a change manager. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you, Tamara. And for the audience, I'm sure you found that very interesting. Before we get on to sort of dive into that a little bit more, I'd like to just draw your attention to the QR code. So we are actively seeking feedback And I know some of you may have to drop off before the end of the panel discussion, or at least some of the questions. So please do scan the QR code, and it will enable you to provide some feedback either now or later on, and also allow you to get a copy of that presentation. And I'd like to move now to the panel discussion itself. So Fiona, Tamara, you've heard from already, and many of you may know Warwick and Chris already, but for those of you who don't, very warm welcome to you both. But Warwick is the chairman and CEO of KPMG Vietnam and Cambodia, which is an organization with 4 offices across the 2 countries in 4 different cities, and approximately 1,800 employees or so. So what we call quite a large organization. And then Chris Jeffrey, who not only is the chairman of BritCham Vietnam, but happens to be the chief academic officer for the British University of Vietnam, which has a student and faculty population of again, about 2,000 individuals. Both have been through a lot of change, organizations, whether it's CBRE, KPMG, BUV, and your own as the audience. And we can't talk about the pandemic quite enough, but it is, as Tamara put it, it's the elephant in the room, and it is such a huge impact. But actually, it's not everything. And I know that, and well, I think we'd like to start with yourself. I know that KPMG embarked upon a change program and moving into an agile working strategy back in 2019. Fantastic foresight, of course. Perhaps you could share a bit more about what it was that KPMG went through and why.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Really, really pleased to be here, and welcome everybody. Yeah, you're right. It was amazing foresight back in 2019, also known as the age of jet travel, back when we could move around and do other things than we can do today. But what we did at KPMG in Vietnam and Cambodia progressively is we moved from an old style or conventional style workplace to an agile workplace. And why we say it was with great foresight, because it's a trend which was really accelerated rapidly during the pandemic, where people have had to work differently. We found ourselves really well prepared when the pandemic started, because we had really started back in 2019 to prepare. So moving to an agile workplace, what sort of change does it involve? Well, it means shifting the way our people work, and in kind of 3 big ways. One, from being in a fixed place where they all turn up and sit at the desk, the old cube farm type setup in terms of the physical environment, and they go back to the same desk every day and all the desks look the same, to a place where they could really be working anywhere. And that was a big change. So essentially they move from having a fixed place to an anywhere place, and that anywhere can even be outside the office. Also means moving from an own space to a shared space environment. So we're familiar with old office environments where everybody has their little pictures and toys and things they collect over the years, to being in a shared space, which meant they had to give up some of that sort of privacy, but also some of that ability to carry around the sort of memories that you gather along the way, which is a big change. And it meant from our point of view and a management point of view, moving from a control structure where you can look out of your office and see everybody that works for you, to a trust structure or a trust environment where you really have to trust people and understand what they're doing. So that was the big change. It was a huge change for us. We had to think about a lot of the issues that Tamara and Fiona just covered. It's more than just a physical environment, but we did change our physical environment. Our KPMG offices started to look more like kind of hipster cafes than KPMG accounting offices. So that was a big change. We had to change a lot of the technology. There was a big technology component to this, the way people use mobile devices to book their seats, the way they use technology to access the resources of the company and so on. So we had to make it that everybody could access the whole suite of tools that they use from a mobile device, because they no longer had that fixed workplace. So a lot of technology involved, a lot of sort of regulatory and policy issues to consider. All the old rule books that we had around, what time the office opens and dress codes and all sorts of things had to be rethought about with the change. And lastly, and this really does, I think you can't overemphasize enough the point that Tamira and Fiona were making, it's also a big cultural change. So it's that leading people through understanding why you're doing this change and how it's going to change the way we all interact and the way we view the workplace and all those sorts of things. So yeah, lots of it was a huge change. It's still ongoing, actually. It's something that you can't rush. We're in fact really rolling it out in Cambodia at the moment for our colleagues in Phnom Penh. So we move progressively through the organisation over the 2 years that we've been underway, and we learned a lot during the course of it. So we'll probably expand on that during our chit chat.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Warwick. And actually, I think it's quite interesting. Of course, the culture is very big, moving from sort of own spaces to shared space. So I think these are concepts that, where do I put my photograph of my family or whatever it is? People like that, but it is something to move on to. And also about the regulatory, and this is something we'll definitely touch on later, and was a question that was brought up in the registration. So I think we'll look at that a bit more. Now, Chris, BUV forced them to teach online in the past 18 months. You, as we said, it's a gargantuan task of switching sort of 2,000 faculty staff to online learning and presenting. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of BUV, again, I'd like to think we had foresight. We decided 3 years ago to move to a 4IR basis. So all students actually get iPads and all the textbooks are ebooks, and we had a great learning management system. And originally that was designed and introduced to support the face-to-face learning. With COVID and everything that's happened, we actually moved directly overnight to online. So we used our resources we'd invested in to really support students through that period. And I think one of the key aspects is that we believed in stability. So students needed to have a stable environment, whether it's virtual or in person. So the timetable stayed the same, the lecture content stayed the same, but we adapted the style, the interaction, because one of the things that can happen is you look at a computer screen and actually you don't know if people are asleep or awake or doing anything else while you're lecturing.
Yeah, cameras on. It's
to keep people on their toes by quizzes. So yeah, so we did that. And the other key thing I think is really about parents for a university in Vietnam was really to integrate the parents into the system. Originally, parents didn't know what their sons or daughters were doing on Canvas, our learning management system. So we introduced a lot of stakeholder engagement, utilizing the software so they could experience how their son or daughter were learning during this period, because there is an uncertainty of the quality, there is an uncertainty if people are actually delivering, and we were able to sort that out. So I think technology played a key part, but the other one was the team really adapting to it and going with it under pressure. And to begin with, everyone was a beginner, a learner, if you like, but the team very quickly learned the tools and the methodologies to utilize it in this different environment, in that phrase, the new normal.
It's interesting. When we were speaking last week, I really like your idea of the lunch and learn, with pizza deliveries to people's houses, and so that the students can really be involved. And that's a really, really clever idea. And actually, we discussed, how did you transition, because we've not all been working from home or learning from home. What was your experience in that return to in-person teaching and then the transition back?
Well, we actually planned for a transition period with students of 3 weeks. So we were going to run dual delivery. So students who could and wanted to come back could learn on campus, and those who were still nervous or uncertain could actually stay at home and learn remotely. And in fact, that 3-week plan became, I think it was a 1-week plan, because everyone was so keen to come back. I would like to say it was to see me and the faculty, but the reality is I think they actually wanted to see their friends and to interact with each other again. So the grand plan was 3 weeks. In reality, it was about a week that people started coming in. And so I think that really shows that there is a kind of pent-up demand for students and for other people to get back to some sort of normality, to get back to be able to chat face to face, to laugh and enjoy, and occasionally to sleep at the back of a lecture theatre. So they wanted to do that.
Well, I was thrilled to come to the office today on the promise of better internet, but I think actually my home internet may be a little bit better than Honky M for some reason today. Warwick, I think when we were speaking, I'd love it if you could share a bit more about the tenets, the actions that you put in place and took during that change in the Agile and then moving on during the pandemic.
Yeah, so we had, as I said, we'd started with the Agile process and moving to that back in 2019. So that was important, and we did that. Firstly, we piloted it. I think that was an important part of our success. It was showing the whole organisation that it could work by picking part of the organisation first. We chose consulting, the other most sort of readily willing to change. And we did that partly for, I think, a point raised by Tamira earlier, which is that a lot of the way people build trust in Vietnam is not necessarily in those sort of emails from me and from town halls, but from chit-chatting to each other and from hearing from others' experiences. So the pilot was really important because we knew that the consultants would say this is actually quite good, and people would hear that and then trust it a bit more than just hearing it from me. Also, leadership. Tone at the top, the way we as leaders got excited about it and were positive about it was really, really important as well. We had to set a framework where we recognized we had to be flexible. We had to change some things to be suitable for Vietnam that might not have worked in other offices or in Western cultures. But we also had to have some bottom lines that just made it work, and we couldn't give up on, because we had really important business objectives to achieve. So doing all that enabled us quickly, when it came time to go and work at home during pandemic and shift, that we could very quickly shift 1,800 people from a physical work environment to a virtual one, thanks to the investments we'd made prior. I'm not going to say seamless, but it's been pretty good, because we've done particularly the cultural change, the move to a lot of online meetings and all those sorts of things. And the giving up of that sort of physical workspace to being mobile and agile. So that helped us. And it meant, as we have started to, over the last year, with different rules applying at various times in Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Da Nang, Phnom Penh, we have been able to adapt very quickly to whatever the rules are at any given time in terms of physical work environment versus at home. So right now, today, we have totally different environments in each of the 4 cities as to who's in the office and who's not, and what we can do face to face and what we can't. And that's changed. Cambodia went through a different time cycle to Vietnam in terms of its vaccination program, and obviously Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang are all at different points. So that ability to flex, if you like, the organisation depending on the current settings has been really important. Fiona said earlier the role of the office has changed, and I think it has. I think it's used differently. It's not that everybody goes to the office every day, and this has really made that really clear. Where some of our people are in offices meeting in Cambodia today, we would have more than half the people will be in the office, versus Ho Chi Minh City where there'll be nobody. but that could flip in a few months' time, right? And so I think we're really able to be very agile and to move quickly in and out of the different environment with pretty minimal disruption to the actual business, and we're seeing that in business results. It's the business is carried on pretty well.
I think that's probably pretty key. That change being managed effectively, and we'll be asking. We've had our first question in for you, specifically for you, Warwick. So you're the hot topic, which we'll come to in just a moment. There were some questions. One of the ones that came through in during the registration stage, we did provide an option to ask the question was, I'd like maybe each of you to pick two most effective ways you think to change an organization in the Vietnamese culture. So Tamara, you touched on this in your presentation. Let's go with Chris first. So you've got two top tips.
I think it's take a holistic approach. It should be fun, it should be human. I think you need to talk to people and communicate. And also I think you need to be clear in your own mind and have a very clear idea what you want to achieve. Otherwise confusion occurs and it can delay and even scupper completely.
Excellent. And Tamara, I know you're currently working on a project here in Hanoi with myself. And what about your experience working in Vietnam over the last few years? Have you got two sort of effective ways to add to that, to what Chris was saying?
Apologies, I have to be that person who put myself on mute. Yes, just to add to what Chris said, I totally agree that it's really important to set that initial change idea, change visions in order to very much unify and rally around all of the activities we need to do in order to drive the changes. And I think in my experience, often, change is difficult and there will be certain level of apprehensions, resistance even when people don't understand change. But, once you take the time to take people through what's the different benefits are, and I believe there's always benefits in some degrees for everybody, and more specific, making it very personal and relevant to certain individuals or teams in terms of how it really can help to tie in the KPIs and help them to work better, and then be very honest about it. It's almost growing pains with any changes. That it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but hopefully with the right leadership, steer plenty of patience, side conversations, and so on. That there will be benefits for everybody along on this journey. And as we can see that what we're seeing today is the changes that is constantly happening and people are adapting to them.
Excellent. I think that leads quite nicely into tacking into the question for Warwick. So Warwick, what key specific lessons or experiences did KPMG learn, particularly focus on the leadership style, and so to change to keep pace with that workplace shift?
Yeah, so on leadership, it's really important that we talk a lot about tone at the top in an organization like ours, and that's goes to our values and to our culture and to the way we understand risk and so on. Tone at the top was really important when doing a major change, because people basically don't like change, and they need to see that people they look up to are happy with it and are moving with it. So I think that that tone at the top and making sure that I as the CEO, but also my whole leadership team and management group maintained not only a positive disposition towards the changes, smile about it, look good, feel happy, but also make sure the changes impact you as well, right? You can't expect everybody else to change and you not change. So that maintaining tone at the top was really, really important, because people are looking to leaders for how they should respond as well. I think two other things come to mind, building on both what Chris and Tamara just said about the sort of points. We did have to really Vietnamize our approach. That is, adapt what was a template we picked up from KPMG in the UK and Australia for Agile and make sure it was going to work in the Vietnam context. And two of the really important things that we changed. One was that in those other offices, particularly in Western offices, we were able to eliminate hierarchy of space. So everybody got the same space. You know, famously, the senior partner would be out working on the floor in a shared workspace and so on. We found in Vietnam that just wasn't going to work. Culturally, people expect a hierarchy and they want you to maintain a hierarchy of space so that the more senior you get, you do earn a different sort of a work environment, if you like, so that people know to look up to that. There's a lot of signaling goes on from that. So we maintained some of that. We realized that trying to achieve 100% on this was just going to actually potentially make the whole project fail. And the second thing, which was really important, was the social side of it. I mean, everybody at KPMG is 23, and as we know, you know, young people in Vietnam love to socialize, love to meet each other, to chit chat, to have food together, to have a drink together, and so on. So, you know, we invested pretty heavily in social spaces, and in every KPMG office in Vietnam and coming up in Cambodia, you'll find a clubhouse, spelled with a K, of course, and that clubhouse is a place for people to socialize. You know, it's really not a workplace. Some people do, but it's a social space, and that component of it was really important because of the heavy social aspect of people coming to work in Vietnam, and particularly in a workforce like ours. So yeah, those are some of the learnings that I got out of this particular big project.
Thanks, that's very good. I think, Fiona, just like there's a question for yourself, which perhaps if you can link in with maybe some comment on what you've heard from Warwick and Chris so far today. But the question is, people resist to change, how to deal with it? Very to the point.
Yeah, the key part there is really, I would always say, listen with empathy. You know, think about when people are going through that vast change there. It may not seem, you know, a big deal to you, you know, and you might have been planning things for the last 6 months or a year or whatever, but this is new. This is something that's going to fundamentally change somebody's life. So really listen with empathy, really understand what they're going through. Show compassion when you're going through it, you know, and show that you are really engaged, you really understand what these people are going through, what that would actually have as an impact, and help go on the journey together. You're not imposing this, you're doing this together. You know, an organization is only successful with really engaged people. And if you go on that journey together and really show that compassion, the commitment, the empathy, that's really what makes the whole journey work out together. You know, so you're actually both going to the same destination. You're just going at the pace of each employee there to help them through that journey together.
Thank you very much. And I think with that, really we're 10:58, so I need to draw this to a close. Sadly, we didn't get time. There are a number of questions streaming in now, so it's certainly been one of probably our most popular topic that we've done. So there's some questions about activity-based working, measures, desk space. I think when it comes to desk sharing and that planning and that side of things, please drop us a line after this, and we can send you some further information and what's been done, and we can have that conversation offline with you. There's a huge amount that goes into it, and Samara and Fiona and definitely Warwick will be able to explain more about that in the planning side. So with that, thank you very much again for joining us. I will just flip up on my screen the QR code. So please do scan the QR code, share your feedback. We'll send you the presentation, and please, you know, speak to us. We're here to support, and there's a lot that can be done, and a lot of change that will come in the coming years. And when it comes to that workplace design, absolutely, we're here and have the experience in country and at a regional level. So a big thank you to Fiona, to Tamara, to Warwick, and to Chris, and to all of you for watching and being part of this. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.